Yes, I mean, at the moment when you look at the government, particularly the Chancellor and economic policy, it's kind of walking off the edge of a cliff. It knows it's doing so, and yet it can't think of anything else to do. I mean, it's got into a position, you've seen last week, these latest polls, where Labour was down to 15% and fourth behind not just Reform, indeed less than half the polling of Reform, but behind not just the Tories, but behind the Greens as well. And that's before the tax rises. And everywhere you look, where politicians have been elected promising not to increase taxes and then do the exact opposite of what they promised big time, George Bush the first, of course, being the most famous example of that, the electorate takes a penalty from them. The electorate takes it out on them. And when you're already down to 15% on the polls, how much further have you got to fall by raising taxes even more? And yet she's between a rock and a hard place on her fiscal sums. She has to do something. And the only way you raise a lot of money is you either raise income tax, or you raise VAT, or you raise national insurance, of which she's already done a bit of that. So she's in an impossible position. And I think she is the fall guy of this government. I think she'll be gone before spring is out, because by early this year it will become apparent that this budget is even more disastrous than our first budget, and Labour support will be in freefall.
Imagine, if you will, a political house of cards built on a foundation of soggy digestive biscuits and misplaced optimism. Now, imagine Andrew Neil walking into that room with a heavy-duty industrial fan. That, my friends, is the current state of 10 Downing Street. We are witnessing a level of political disintegration so spectacular it makes a slow-motion car crash look like a high-speed ballet. Sir Keir Starmer, a man who once promised stability and adults in the room, is currently finding out that the room is on fire. The adults have bolted for the fire escapes, and Andrew Neil is outside narrating the incineration with the clinical precision of a master forensic scientist. We are diving deep into the endgame of a premiership that seems to be running on fumes and sheer, unadulterated hubris. Quick favor, if you are finding this breakdown of political mayhem insightful, do hit that subscribe button. Believe it or not, over 92% of our viewers have not yet subscribed. It is entirely free, takes but a second of your time, and truly means the world to our team here at Canadian Hub. Thank you ever so much if you did. Now, back to the unfolding chaos.
And he went through a whole range of things: nationalised rail, mail, energy, and so on, abolish universal credit, abolish university tuition fees, wealth tax, and all the rest of it.
To understand the sheer magnitude of the demolition job Andrew Neil has performed, one must first appreciate the weapon he uses, the cold, hard, unforgiving truth. Neil is not merely a commentator, he is a political guillotine with a Scottish accent and a penchant for impeccable tailoring. When he speaks, the Westminster bubble holds its breath, usually because they are terrified of what is coming next. And what is coming for Sir Keir Starmer is not just a critique, it is a eulogy delivered while the subject is still technically breathing. The crux of the current crisis revolves around the ghost of New Labour past, Lord Mandelson. In a move that can only be described as a masterclass in reading the room incorrectly, Starmer attempted to ship Mandelson off to Washington as the ambassador to the United States. It is an appointment that screams out of touch so loudly it could shatter glass from London to Lancashire. Neil's assessment was blunt. The Mandelson scandal will not play well in the upcoming Crunch by-election in Gordon and Denton. And by not play well, he means it is essentially the political equivalent of handing out lead-flavored lollipops to the electorate. The optics are, to put it mildly, catastrophic. While the average voter is worrying about the cost of living and the crumbling state of public services, the Prime Minister is busy trying to find a plush retirement home for a peer whose reputation is, let us be charitable and say, complicated. It reinforces every negative stereotype the British public holds about the governing class, that it is a closed shop, a private members club, where the elite look after their own while the rest of the country watches through the window in the rain.
Tell you what, a lot of people, because you're reluctant to say what Charlie Faulkner thinks you think. And that is, you're reluctant because a large part of the Labour membership still worships Jeremy Corbyn.
I worked well with him. He actually led us through some really difficult times. I had disputes with Jeremy, things I didn't agree with him on, and we either had it out around the shadow cabinet table, or on occasion I went to his constituency office and we had a discussion there.
You cannot plan the future without understanding the past. And if you have nothing bad to say about Mr. Corbyn's leadership now, why did you take part in the attempt to topple him as leader In 26.
Now, when a leader finds themselves in a tailspin, the traditional move is to find a scapegoat. In this particular Shakespearean tragedy, the fingers are pointing directly at Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's chief of staff. Reports are swirling that Labour ministers are practically screaming at Starmer to fire McSweeney tonight to save his premiership. It is the classic fire the manager to save the club strategy, but Andrew Neil is not buying it for a single solitary second. Neil took to X, the platform formerly known as Twitter and currently known as the world's most chaotic town square, to pour cold water on the idea that sacking McSweeney would change a thing. He argued that Starmer's plight is way beyond being turned around by making McSweeney the sacrificial lamb. It is a powerful analogy. If your ship is sinking because there is a gaping hole in the hull, throwing the navigator overboard might make you feel better for 5 minutes, but you are still going to end up at the bottom of the ocean. McSweeney certainly pushed the Mandelson case, but the ultimate responsibility lies with the man at the top. The Mandelson for Washington gambit was not just a staffer's error. It was a fundamental failure of judgment by Keir Starmer himself. It suggests a prime minister who is more interested in satisfying the internal power dynamics of his party's old guard than he is in actually governing for the people who put him there.
I mean, there are a lot of fundamental issues which need to be tackled in our country. A lot of them are allowed just to atrophy under the Conservatives. They are not of any reforming zeal. But given the scale of problems that we face, from health to infrastructure and so on, he just doesn't have the blueprint that is going to put that right. I think he can do some things that will improve matters, but this will not be a transformative government. He doesn't have it in him to be transformative. The cabinet isn't good enough to be transformative either. So I think it's the best you can hope for is that things get a bit better. And, even that would be some.
This brings us to the looming shadow of February 26, the Gorton and Denton by-election. In politics, by-elections are often treated as minor tremors, but Neil is predicting a full-blown earthquake. He has labeled this vote as the final nail in the coffin for Starmer. If Labour loses this seat, a seat they should by all rights hold comfortably, the authority of the Prime Minister will not just be diminished, it will be non-existent. The irony is thick enough to cut with a dull knife. Labour MPs are already muttering ruefully about the fact that Starmer moved heaven and earth to get Mandelson a ticket to Washington, yet he actively blocked Andy Burnham, the popular mayor of Greater Manchester, from running in Gorton. It is a slap in the face to the local electorate and a middle finger to the more popular populist wing of the party. You cannot tell people you represent the working class while simultaneously snubbing their local heroes in favor of a peer from the 90s. Andrew Neil's logic is devastatingly simple. If Starmer is still around as prime minister by the time that result comes in, and it is a defeat, there is no coming back. You cannot lose your heartlands while your inner circle is embroiled in a cronyism scandal and expect to lead a nation. It is the political equivalent of a dead man walking scenario, where the only thing left is to decide on the font for the resignation letter.
Oh, yes. Well, at the moment, Rachel Reeves is Keir Starmer's air raid shelter. And if you get rid of the air raid shelter, you're exposed to dropping bombs coming down on your head. And I think there's every chance that she'll be gone early in the new year as the unpopularity of the budget sinks in, and that he'll be gone by the very latest after the May elections, which in Scotland, England and Wales will be disastrous for him. So I think it's looking very grim. And of course, a change of leadership probably isn't going to change that much. But he is deeply unpopular now, not just in the country, but deeply unpopular within his own party. And although I think the wiser Labour MPs think, we can change the leadership, probably still won't make that much difference, they still just want rid of him. They just want to change and see what have they got to lose. Because at the moment, around 2/3 of the Parliamentary Labour Party at the next election is heading for the knackers yard. So what have you got to lose by trying something different?
It is not just Andrew Neil who smells blood in the water. Andrew Marr, another titan of British broadcasting, has weighed in with an equally grim assessment. Speaking on LBC, Marr suggested we have reached a tipping point. He pointed to the furious, disillusioned Labour MPs and Starmer's frankly unconvincing performance regarding the Mandelson affair. When you lose the room, you lose the power. Marr's point about authority is crucial. He rightly asks, what about Ukraine? What about the bond markets? What about relations with Donald Trump? These are the massive global issues that require a leader with ironclad authority and a clear sense of direction. But Starmer is currently so bogged down in the swamp of his own making that he cannot see the horizon. Politics, at its core, is about the perception of power. Once the public and your own MPs stop believing you have the mandate to lead, your ability to handle international crises or economic volatility evaporates. The Prime Minister was forced into a humiliating U-turn over his handling of the Mandelson row, which is yet another blow to his rapidly evaporating authority. U-turns are the hallmark of a government that is reacting to events rather than shaping them. It is the sign of a leader who is perpetually on the back foot, swinging wildly at shadows while the real threats close in.
Their reputations are already in the dirt from previous Epstein disclosures, but this makes it even worse. Not just some kind of monetary relationship with Epstein, not just the fact that both seemed content to remain his friend even after he had served time for the sexual abuse of a minor and was on the sex offenders register, but with Peter Mandelson advising Epstein's rich banker friends how to lobby the government to avoid tax on their banker bonuses, telling them, quote, to be mildly threatening with the government. This is a government he was the business secretary of when he gave that advice. I mean, it doesn't go.
If the mere mention of Lord Mandelson's name was enough to raise eyebrows, the fresh revelations regarding his links to Jeffrey Epstein have acted as a political tactical nuke. We are not talking about a casual social acquaintance here. We're talking about leaked emails that suggest a materially different level of closeness than what was originally disclosed. Mandelson reportedly urged Epstein to fight for early release while he was awaiting sentencing for a child sex offense. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the man Sir Keir Starmer personally chose to represent Great Britain in the heart of Washington, D.C. The question that is currently setting the Westminster Village on fire is a simple one. How on earth did this pass the vetting process? Or, perhaps more chillingly, did the government simply ignore the red flags? Andrew Neil's demolition of Starmer's credibility hinges on this very point. It suggests either a catastrophic failure of due diligence or a level of arrogance that believes the rules simply do not apply to the favored sons of the labor establishment. To make matters even more bizarre, and frankly, quite British, the scandal peaked with Mandelson being photographed urinating in public and appearing on front pages in his underpants. It would be comical if it weren't so tragic. You cannot send a man who is the subject of international tabloid ridicule to represent the UK during a state visit by Donald Trump. It is not just a lapse in judgment, it is a full-blown diplomatic disaster. By the time Starmer finally sacked Mandelson on February 4th, the damage wasn't just done, it was scorched into the very fabric of his premiership.
Mandelson betrayed our country, our parliament, and my party. Mr. Speaker, he lied repeatedly to my team when asked about his relationship with Epstein before and during his tenure as ambassador. I regret appointing him. If I knew then what I know now, he would never have been anywhere near government. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Cabinet Secretary, with my support, took the decision to refer material to the police.
While Mandelson was busy being a one-man wrecking ball in Washington, a second front was opening up back home in Manchester. The Gorton and Denton by-election was triggered by the resignation of Andrew Gwynn, and for a brief moment, it looked like a chance for Labour to show a united front. Enter Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, a man with a popularity rating Starmer can only dream of, expressed a desire to return to Westminster and contest the seat. What followed was a display of petty factionalism that would make a secondary school drama club blush. Starmer and a 10-strong group from the National Executive Committee voted to block Burnham's candidacy. The official excuse was that it would divert resources and trigger a costly mayoral by-election. The unofficial reason, which everyone from the BBC to the local pub knows, is that Starmer is terrified of Burnham. Neil's analysis here is particularly biting. He notes that Labour MPs are muttering that Starmer chose Mandelson for Washington, but stopped Andy Burnham from running in Gorton. It is the ultimate own goal. By blocking Burnham, Starmer didn't just annoy a popular politician, he insulted the entire north of England. He essentially told the people of Manchester that their preferences don't matter as much as protecting his own flank from a potential leadership challenge. It is the move of a man who is governing out of fear, not out of vision. Nature abhors a vacuum and politics abhors a weak prime minister. Into the space of Labour disillusionment has stepped Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage and represented in Gorton and Denton by Matt Goodwin. Now, Goodwin is not your average candidate. He is a former academic and GB News presenter who knows exactly how to weaponize the forgotten man narrative. He is pitching this by-election as a literal referendum on this for months. Reform has the momentum. They have already snatched seats in previous by-elections And with the high-profile defections of Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, they are starting to look like a legitimate parliamentary force. In Gorton and Denton, Goodwin is hammering home the message that Starmer is part of the Westminster blob, the very same blob that tried to send Mandelson to Washington while snubbing the local hero, Andy Burnham. Labour has everything to lose. Their majority of 13,000 looks like a fortress of sand against the incoming tide of reform on the right and a surging Green Party on the left. If the progressive vote splits and the working class vote migrates to reform, Starmer is looking at a defeat that would be, as Neil put it, the final nail in his political coffin. You cannot lose a Manchester Heartland seat and expect to keep your keys to number 10. The arithmetic of survival simply doesn't add up. We must return to the enigmatic figure of Morgan McSweeney. For years, McSweeney was hailed as the genius behind Starmer's rise to power, the man who pivoted the party away from the Corbyn era and towards a landslide victory. But as Andrew Neil correctly points out, the genius tag is starting to look a bit frayed at the edges. McSweeney is the one who reportedly pushed for the Mandelson appointment, and he is the one currently accused of orchestrating vicious briefings against other cabinet ministers like Wes Streeting. The internal vibe in the Labour Party is now described by some MPs as having lost the dressing room. When your own cabinet ministers are holding peace talks because your chief of staff is leaking against them, you aren't leading a government, you're managing a civil war. Neil's point that Starmer is way beyond being saved by sacking McSweeney is the most damning part of the whole saga. It suggests that even if Starmer fires his right-hand man, the public's perception of him as a weak, indecisive leader is already baked in. Sacking Sue Gray was supposed to be the reset. Promoting McSweeney was supposed to be the fix. If the fix is now the problem, what is left? The reality is that Starmer has become a passenger in his own premiership. He is reacting to headlines created by his own staff and trying to clean up messes made by his own appointments. It is an exhausting, unsustainable way to run a country.
I was a junior reporter in the Hartlepool Mail. I can tell you it wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. Right, so I've known him a very long time. I think he's always been drawn to wealth and power. I think he's a bit of a narcissist. I think the idea of putting him into the current Washington, D.C., which is like, a sweet shop for wealth and power and narcissism, wasn't a great idea. But the specific charge against him at the moment, that he should have known about Peter Mandelson's continuing links with Jeffrey Epstein in a way that the media didn't already know, needs to be examined by this inquiry. And people who prejudged that inquiry are not relying on facts and evidence and substance. They're relying on the usual Westminster currency of febrility and angst and mood, which is not a way that we should decide where we change Prime Minister yet again after 1 or 2 years.
Let's talk about that tipping point Andrew Marr mentioned. Authority is a curious thing in politics. You don't realize how much you have until it's gone. And once it's gone, you can't buy it back at any price. Starmer's authority is currently being shredded on the international stage. While he was in Japan trying to talk about true patriotism, the headlines back home were all about Lord Mandelson's Epstein emails and the blocking of Andy Burnham. How can Starmer sit across from Donald Trump or Volodymyr Zelensky and project strength when he can't even control his own National Executive Committee? How can he talk about integrity when he spent days defending an ambassadorial appointment that was clearly indefensible? The bond markets are watching, the allies are watching, and most importantly, the voters in Gorton and Denton are watching. Politics is about direction. It's about knowing where the North Star is and heading towards it. Right now, Keir Starmer looks like a man who has lost his compass, his map, and his shoes. He is wandering through the political wilderness, hoping that if he ignores the criticisms from people like Andrew Neil long enough, they might just go away. But Andrew Neil doesn't go away. He just gets louder, sharper, and more correct with every passing day.
Going to say this is another little circle of hell for all the people who have gone through so much hell before. Gloria, thank you very, very much indeed for talking to me. Peter Mandelson's role in recent Labour history can hardly be overstated. He has been a subject of suspicion for many, but a close confidant and friend to many others. The betrayal they now all feel is deep. One person who knew him well is Labour's Baroness Helena Kennedy. She's an advocate for women's rights, and she came in to tell me of a time that she spoke about the victims of Epstein's crimes to Mandelson himself.
The countdown to February 26 is now the only thing that matters in British politics. It is the date when the muttering of Labour MPs will either turn into a full-blown roar of rebellion or a silent terminal acceptance of defeat. If Angeliki Stogia, the Labour candidate, can't hold off the challenge from Matt Goodwin and the Greens, the game is up. Labour is trapped in the squeezed middle. They are losing the woke vote to the Greens over foreign policy and environmental issues, and they are losing the patriotic working class vote to reform over immigration and the perception of elite cronyism. It is a pincer movement of Starmer's own making. By trying to be everything to everyone, he has ended up being nothing to nobody. As we look toward that crunch by-election, the ghost of Mandelson and the snub shadow of Burnham will be loitering at every polling station. Andrew Neil's prediction of a final nail isn't just a catchy phrase, it's a mathematical probability. When the history books are written about this period, they will point to this moment as the time when the Starmer project finally collided with reality. And reality, as we know, is a very unforgiving place for politicians who forget who they are supposed to be serving. Now, you might be wondering, what does a by-election in Manchester have to do with the Canadian geopolitical landscape? The answer is everything. The UK is one of Canada's most vital partners in intelligence, trade, and global security. A British government in a state of terminal paralysis is a British government that cannot lead on the world stage. When the UK is distracted by internal scandals and leadership endgames, it leaves a vacuum in the Commonwealth and within the G7. We are entering a period of extreme global volatility. From the ongoing conflict in Ukraine to the shifting dynamics of the US-UK trade relationship, under a second Trump term, Canada needs a stable, decisive partner in London. Instead, we are seeing a prime minister who is fighting for his political life over a discredited peer and a local council seat. It is a stark reminder that in the modern world, domestic failures have international consequences. The final nail in Starmer's coffin might be driven in by the voters of Gorton and Denton, but the sound of the hammer will be heard all the way in Ottawa. We are witnessing the collapse of a political brand in real time, and the lesson for leaders everywhere is clear. Ignore your heartlands and protect your cronies at your own peril. The demolition job started by Andrew Neil is almost complete. All that's left is for the voters to finish the job. Thank you ever so much for watching. Good day.